What's up, guys? How y'all doing? Yeah, and I apologize. I'm waiting on my guests to show up. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for everybody that liked the stream before I even started, man. I definitely appreciate it. Just waiting on Mike V to get here. Yeah, what's up? What's up? Thanks, Matt, for being here. Gear Z Nat, what's happening? Professor Black Ops, what's good, man? How you doing? Yeah, I'm excited about this one too, man, because I enjoy everything they do over at the Black Brain Trust. You know what I'm saying? And so they they really do a lot of great things. As far as putting information out there for people. So I'm excited, man. So as soon as he get here, we gonna get started, man. I definitely appreciate it. What's up, Mitchell? How you doing, man? I definitely appreciate you being here, man. Make sure I got everything squared away. But how you guys Saturday is going? You know what I'm saying? See, I'm trying to chip in at the trust too. Yeah, I try to see. I'm the type of person that likes to um, only hop on and talk about things that I actually know about. You know what I'm saying? And I try to listen when they talk about other topics, especially like when it comes to politics and all that stuff. That like, I'm not versed. Oh, there we go. What's up, man? Hold up. Let me. Hey, what's up, Mike? I can hear you. All right, how you doing, man? How you doing? Yeah, man, I'm excited about this one, though, man. I'm happy you was able to, come through and bless the platform with, with some of your knowledge and everything, man. Yeah, so and sorry, I do things a little. I had to do it a little different or whatever because I can't. I haven't really tried Zoom because I like to have the backgrounds and all that stuff or whatever set up. Uh, and I ain't really mastered Zoom enough to do all that. So hold up, I'm saying they
Yeah.
can't hear you. I think you wanna no.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I just had it muted on OBS because when I record or whatever, I had to mute the desktop sometimes. But you good now.
All right.
Cool. So thank you guys for being here. I definitely appreciate you guys coming through. I'm excited about this one. Like I said, got Mike V from the Black Brain Trust. I definitely appreciate him coming through or whatever. This is my seventh tech talk. And like I said, I've been trying to, do these things so I can, just bring, other people's experiences and all that stuff from working in the IT field. You know what I'm saying? I've been in the field for, over 10 years or whatever, working in different positions. And like I said, I don't know all the answers. I like to try to, get other people's perspectives and, and what they do, uh, especially in a field that I've never worked in before. And that's why I wanted to get Mike V on here because he talks about, he works in the cybersecurity field. And like I said, he runs a channel, him and a couple other guys, they started a channel called the Black Brain Trust where they talk about just different topics, especially dealing with fourth industrialized and IT and politics and all that good stuff. So I'm just happy to have him here so he can bring some perspective. But please welcome my guest, Mike V. Let him say hey in the chat or whatever. And how you doing, Mike V?
I'm doing good, bro. And yourself?
Hanging in there, trying to stay alive.
All right.
Yeah, man. But so the first thing I like to do when I get things started is to allow you to introduce yourself as well as give a little bit about your background so people can find out about you.
Yeah. So, name is Mike V. So, work with the Black Brain Trust. The Black Brain Trust is a intellectual co-op, as we call it. Basically, a platform that is shared with other subject matter experts in our field, and we collaborate on different sort of topics and have intellectualized discourse on each subject matter that we cover, such as space and technology, geopolitics, blockchain, economics, and other sorts of tech. And so my background is a long history, about 10 to 15 years, just roughly about 15 years in IT and about 5 years in cybersecurity. I've worked in various roles in IT, such as with the desktop and data centers and so on and so forth. And I got into cybersecurity in the latter part of my career.
Okay, cool. So, like, how did you get into IT? If you don't mind me asking, like, what made you actually get into the IT field?
Yeah, I used to play basketball, and someone brought me a laptop, and basically it had Windows 95 on it. It was a Toshiba, if I remember correctly. And I put the ball down and picked up the laptop and started from there. And so working on break fix of different sort of computers and other electronics led me down that path into IT. And so I got my first role in IT around 03.
Okay, cool. So, did you start out by going to school after that, or just can you elaborate on if you like how you got your if you got education and how did what area you went into and all that stuff if you don't mind.
Yeah, so I actually am a high school dropout. I got my GED and then kind of went from there. And so for me, I got into IT first and then went to school.
Okay.
As some people who go to school first and then get into IT, I kind of went about it in a more unorthodox way. And so there's only so far that you can go in IT without some level of post-secondary education. That's what I ended up doing, going to a trade school first. Then I transferred my credits to a accredited institution.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I kind of went to one of those type of schools as well. Like I went to Remington College where, I was trade school basically where I got into. That's kind of how I got into it. So similar backgrounds or whatever. But so let's get into the meat of it, I guess. So if someone is trying to get into IT, where do you think they should start? I know you have a different, everybody's gonna have a different background on where they come from and how they get into it. But what are your recommendations on people that are trying to get in? Where should they start?
I think there should be some kind of aptitude test initially, right? You should ask yourself several questions. Where am I coming from and where am I trying to go? What am I good at, and where do I see myself in the IT industry, right? Because IT has a variety of areas that you can get into: database administration, desktop support, help desk, server and engineering, network engineering, variety of areas, right? So you have to kind of look at this and say, where am I coming from? If I'm a sales guy at Best Buy, where do I fit in the immediate IT industry as it stands right now, right? We have something called sales engineers, right? That, people who push products and actually do demonstrations of products to clients at the high level. A salesperson who may be coming from Best Buy may be able to leverage those skills in that area. So there's a variety of ways of going about this. But the main questions are, where am I coming from? Where am I trying to go? And where do I see myself in IT as a whole?
Okay, cool. Yeah, and I totally agree with that. Yeah, it's like a whole lot of areas or whatever. And we done had conversations about this on your channel, dealing with, trying to figure out where you could fit into those different, areas of IT based on your background and experience and all that stuff. So I definitely agree with you there. So let me ask you this. So how do you keep your technology skills current? Do you, you know, because I mean, we both know. I know for sure. Certifications. You know what I'm saying, and all these different things that can help you get your skills up or whatever. Or how do you actually keep your technology skills current?
Well, it's a lot of reading, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I have to keep abreast on everything that's trending in my area and outside of my area secondary, right? So for me, cybersecurity is where I follow. And then everything else is fourth industrial for me. So I might spend 90 minutes a day just reading about cybersecurity stuff. And then the other half, another 90 minutes I might spend just focusing on what's trending in sort of fourth industrialization, artificial intelligence, machine learning, connected IoT, Internet of Things, 5G, cloud computing. I kind of focus, I have a broader focus to look at and cover, because a lot of things do interact with cybersecurity from a professional standpoint, but where am I trying to go with this as well, right? So I'm keeping myself abreast on both areas, cybersecurity in particular, and fourth industrialization in general.
Okay. Yeah, and that's what I do. Like I had to push a cert that I was supposed to take back. I think I told you about it a while back. The LFCS. I had to push it back because I got caught up at work. But yeah, you constantly have to work on keeping those skills current. Because it changes. So I agree, man. I agree. But since we kind of talked about certifications, let me ask you this though: degree or certs or both? What are your thoughts?
I think 10 years ago we would have probably said degree,
Mm-hmm.
And we would have probably said certs, because corporations used to pay for it. Some still do. Today, I think it's the reverse. I think now you're looking at certificates as well as certs and less degrees, only because computer science is not really IT. It's really outside of the realms of immediate IT, right?
Mm-hmm.
Information systems, however, is more focused on IT because it's more business focused and centric to information technology than computer sciences. So the question is certs versus degrees. I think it's a combination of both. I think you get the information systems degree, whether it's from community college or tech school. I think you go there only if it's cost efficient for you.
Mm-hmm.
Certifications are about what you mastering, right? What your mastery is in. And so if you mastering networking, then CCNA is going to be the cert that you go after, because that's like the benchmark in the West, right? I know in Europe, Juniper is pretty much the big player out there more than anything else. When it comes to certs versus degrees, you have to weigh out how far are you willing to go. You don't necessarily need a degree to be in IT. There's a lot of people who don't have degrees in IT, but at some point you do have to get certified. A lot of corporations value certifications from a decorative standpoint. what's going to happen here is if you decide to work for the government may say must have Network Plus or your DoD 8570, as we know it now. They may say you may need a Network Plus, you may need Security Plus, or you may need a CISSP for level 3 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
These things matter, but having a degree opens up a different perspective, because in the academic field, you have people who go there to learn, and there's also the networking aspect, social networking aspect. Who's going to be your instructor? Who's going to be, your colleagues? When I was in school, my instructors actually worked for HP and Cisco. And so they had in-depth knowledge, and they can write a recommendation for me. Some of my other colleagues were already in the IT field. The job was just paying for their degree. So when it came time for graduation, we all had a lot of leverage off each other because we were already working in the field. Instructors were already, professors or adjunct professors were already working in the field. And so it made it easier to actually navigate and actually relate real world experiences. That's the value of going to school and getting a degree. The other aspect of certifications is just that supercharger, right? You put a supercharger or a turbocharger on the engine, it's going to go faster. More often than not, a certification is valuable in these areas, and the degree is just the stability behind it.
Yeah, I definitely agree, man. Yeah, you right on the money with that, man. So one thing I like to do, since my channel is mainly about Linux, and a lot of people don't really use Linux. They don't know much about Linux. That's mainly why I do it. You know what I'm saying? It's just to, introduce people to Linux, and it's something that I know about and something that I've been using for years, even if I haven't used it in positions, in job positions. But I just wanted to ask, do you have any experience in working with Linux? And also, is it something that you used at your job before?
Yeah, see, in the network and the cybersecurity aspect, Linux is pretty much the benchmark, right?
Mm-hmm.
It pretty much runs all your back-end systems. Very, very seldomly do you run into Windows Server being used. And so for me, Linux is very much part and parcel to how the environment runs. And so you have to have a basic understanding of the command line. But I'm no expert at Linux. Even in my role, I spend 95% of my time in Windows, and maybe 2 to 3% of my time in Mac, and 1% of my time in Linux, because I only have to use it to get into the system. I don't actually have to be inside the system nonstop, because the system is pretty autonomous, right? You make your configuration, and then you upload it and save the file, and then you're pretty much done. You're out of the system.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't spend a whole lot of time in Linux, and I'm no Linux expert at all. I wish I was a Linux expert. I think for people coming into IT and who are trying to get into IT, I think it works best if you start off with Linux first and then move into Windows, because it helps structure you from a thought standpoint and a logistic standpoint, because traditionally in school, they start you off with Windows and then you go into Linux. And so you start off with the GUI and then you try to go into command line, and it's like, whoa, this is different. It's like you drive an automatic transmission car and then someone throwing a 5-speed, 6-speed manual at you, and you're like, well, what do I do with this clutch? I'm not used to this, right? It takes time to actually acclimate yourself into that area. And so that's why, I'm a big proponent of people who are trying to get into IT now. You want to spend at least 45 days playing with Linux, just playing with it. You don't want to actually try to be a Linux engineer. You need to understand and make yourself less afraid of the command line, because you see all, you see all the words going across the screen, but you got to understand that this is a login, this is SSH, this is PuTTY. These are different aspects of it, and you got to just have some literacy of Linux. I think command line literacy is very important.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. And one thing I could add to that, what you're saying, man, it gives you a different perspective on actually using using the operating systems, and because it's a lot that you can do, a lot of things that you could do via command line in Windows is a whole lot better, and that helps you understand the command line. And once you get into managing Windows servers, you can, yeah, PowerShell is God. You know what I'm saying? You could pretty much do everything that you could do in a GUI, via the command line a whole lot faster. And so that's one thing that'll get you acclimated to it. So I definitely agree with you there. You know what I'm saying? Definitely. Um, but let me ask you this then, since we talked about the command line and all that stuff, do you know any programming languages, or are you learning any of them? And also, if you recommend any. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, I don't know any programming languages. See, I came into the industry when everything was siloed. Network engineers stayed in networking. Sysadmins stayed in sysadmin. Desktop people stayed in desktop. Okay. Everything was very siloed. You didn't have to learn any languages. The most you had to know was MS DOS. That was the extent of your programming language, right? From an IT perspective, you always had a subject matter expert on programming. Somebody always knew C++, or they knew Java. There was always that resident person who knew that. Now times have changed. Now they're asking, do you know at least one language? Linux is one of them, even though Linux is not a language, it's an operating system, but they're asking about that now, right? So for me, I didn't come in knowing the language, and I didn't need to know of a language. So what am I studying now is pretty much Python for security orchestration. So I need to automate some of the menial tasks that we do in security on a day-to-day basis. And Python is pretty much the go-to language for that. Now, am I expert at Python? Not by a long shot. I'm still learning Python as I go along. Still a lot of syntax errors I'm picking up and things of that nature. But I think with low code, no code, that's something to pay attention to, because now with low code, no code, you don't really need to be an expert or even a high level person at this. You can actually make a few inputs into or a few suggestions into a program, and it will give you the result based on the limited amount of code needed to actually perform the operation.
Okay, and what's that called again? Is you said, say it again?
Low code, no code. So Google came out with a platform for low code, no code. So if you Google that, you'll see that the language has taken off in the last year or so, and they're predicting that going forward in the next 2 to 3 years of development life cycle, that this is going to be really, really popular. Because what's going to happen is you're going to take a lot of people who did not have a background in programming, and you're going to throw them into low code applications, and it's going to give them, professional program output, basically. It's kind of like, I would say low code is the equivalent of a car that has paddle shifters on it. It's not exactly a manual transmission car, but if you play with the paddles enough, you can shift those gears around.
Okay. Yeah, and hey, that's new to me, man. I'm looking it up now. I love reading about stuff like this, but yeah, that's cool right there. But no, I definitely agree with you. Well, I kind of came in the exact same way. That's what I was gonna say. I came in the exact same way. I mean, the furthest you needed to know, or the farthest you needed to know, as far as programming goes, is like batch scripting. You know what I'm saying? And that's really just moving files around, or doing things with the network a little bit. But no, I appreciate you putting that out, though. I'm trying to find a link for it so I can share it in the chat so people can see if they've never heard of it. But yeah, guys, just Google low code versus no code, or low code no code. and check that out because that's interesting. I'm gonna definitely read that after. But so programming is it needed? Is it important in your job? And the only reason I'm asking, so you know, people I guess that's trying to get in can understand what some of the things that would be expected of them in the different positions. Um,
I think programming makes sense if the responsibilities are consistent with the role, right? So if you come in, let's say if you come into desktop support or something like that, you don't necessarily need to program on that level. But once you start getting into sysadmin work, then programming becomes somewhat of an importance because even Microsoft is getting away from the GUI in the latest version of Server in the, Office 365. They're getting away from that, right? They've adopted a very Unix-centric sort of, approach to their latest installments. And so, is it necessary? I think at some point you might want to get acclimated with it, only because we've moved into this sort of DevOps sort of perspective in IT, right? It's nothing siloed anymore, and DevOps kind of breaks up that sort of traditional operation that was happening before. So now with DevOps, you combine the developer and the IT operations all under one umbrella, and you have a faster turnaround in terms of program development. And in DevOps, I would say most DevOps people know Python back to front. That's their bread and butter.
Yeah, exactly. Now let me ask you this: Do you have any, or have you seen a lot of companies going to that scaled agile framework? Have you heard of that in your position? I mean, because it kind of ties a lot of the DevOps in, with everything like exactly what you said, rolling out software at a faster pace or applications at a faster pace.
Yeah, I have seen companies make that transition. Not all companies can do it because it's not always beneficial to them, and it's a very expensive transition if you haven't fully fleshed out what that looks like over the long haul. And so you can't really automate every single process, right? And so in DevOps, I think a lot of companies will benefit from in the manufacturing industry as well as the healthcare industry. You want to kind of automate all of these sort of very menial tasks and really push updates as quickly as possible, especially in cases of security, because vulnerabilities, are the end all be all. If you have a unpatched server or cloud instance for that matter, and bad guys see that, you're toast. For all intents and purposes, this is kind of what happened to Equifax. Unpatched Apache Struts server was basically the downfall of the organization.
I got you. So since you brought up like automation or whatever, you know what I'm saying, how do you think that will start impacting jobs in the future, as far as automation? And we've talked about this. I just want to, get you to put it out, here as well, if you can.
Automation is going to have a huge impact on everyone, even in the cybersecurity industry. That's going to have a huge impact. Every company that offers services has basically offered some form of automated service. And so, in particular, when you ask that question, Black men will be disproportionately impacted by it because of the fact that they have not upskilled in these areas, or they not existed in these areas. And so if you look at the McKinsey report of 2019, and it talks about fourth industrialization and its impact on the Black community and Black men in particular, you'll see that automation and Black men are almost like oil and water. They just don't really mix all that well because Black men are on the receiving end of being disproportionately impacted by it. And so how does automation really impact these areas? Well, a lot of the remedial tasks that people were working before, such as point of sales. If you go to Home Depot, and a few lines of code just replaced a whole bunch of cashiers.
Yeah.
I mean, who knew that can happen overnight? 2 years ago, there was dozens of people, running the cash registers. Today in 2020, you got pretty much automated systems that you walk up to, and it pretty much, it's a simple process now. And I think when it comes to automation, we have to kind of get at the forefront of areas that can't be automated, basically make your job or make your role indispensable.
Yeah, and you see it every day, man. People see it every day. Like I think I tell you this. I was walking through Walmart, man, and they got one of those machines now that actually scans all the barcodes on the shelf to see what they need to order because it's running out on the shelf. So yeah, automation is coming, for a lot of different positions. You know what I'm saying? And so you're right. Black men are behind when it comes to getting into these fields. That's part of the reason I started my channel. To try to push some of this information to people that don't have the same opportunities or didn't have the same opportunities I had, growing up or whatever. So I appreciate you, stating that. Now, I wanted to, just ask you a little bit about cloud computing. Like, is that something that I guess that people need to start learning or picking up in order to get into these different fields?
Yeah, definitely. I think cloud computing is kind of it's a transition that was bound to happen, but it's also something that is radically different in the respect that traditional IT, was on-prem servers, firewalls and switches and routers and so on and so forth. In cloud, you don't have that. So that physical aspect of interfacing with devices is no longer a case. One of the companies I used to work at a few years ago had zero, actually two of them, both of them, two startups, had zero hardware in the office. The only thing they had was laptops, and that was it. MacBooks and Microsoft Surface Pros. Everything else was in the cloud. They were AWS. They were they were AWS shop, and they were an Azure shop. And so there was nothing there for you to touch. Everything was in the cloud, and unless you understood and had some form of formal training on cloud computing, you were pretty much lost. There was nothing for you to physically touch. So I think, going through, like the Cloud Plus, for example, that's actually a very good primer for cloud computing. And then you want to get into some of the more branded models, such as like AWS or Azure or Oracle or DigitalOcean, Rackspace as well. You don't need to be an expert at cloud computing. You just have to have some form of literacy as to why something is happening. A lot of the old traditional values that you and I came from doesn't apply in the cloud at all, because you don't have these physical, logical systems in place. You just have a lot of lines of code, a lot of GUIs to click through to get to the meat and potatoes of what you need to do from a day-to-day perspective. But what's good about cloud is that the availability is so high, you don't really have to worry about things going down. Whereas in the traditional on-prem environment, if something went down and you were at home, you had to go back to the office and actually resolve that.
Yeah. Exactly. I know exactly what you're talking about, man. It's a lot of that stuff is, and then the companies are, taking on those, kind of basic roles of just keeping things going, as far as like if a hard drive fails, they go in and replace it, or and then with the whole geo replication thing where data is sparsed around the globe, or so that's I don't know, I just I definitely I just agree with what you're saying, man. So lastly, I want to see if anybody has any questions, because I know, I know there's is some people out there that are probably trying to get into IT, and they don't know where to start or whatever. So if you got any questions in the chat, or if you got anything for Mike V, because like I said, he's in cybersecurity, you know what I'm saying? And it seems like a lot of the guys in here, already know you or familiar with you. But if you guys have any questions.
There's one question in the chat, or at least one statement I can answer. Ernest Terry says, isn't it better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it? This is something I always preach all the time, right? This is in regards to certification. But when it comes to programming, it's a little bit different. You might pick up, let's say, C++, but if the environment that you work in is a Java shop, that may not apply. And if you don't really program as often as you need to, in order to have that sharp skill, it's going to go to waste. I know a lot of people who came from some of the old decrepit languages like COBOL and whatnot. That language is not useful in the environment that we're in right now. So they have a very good understanding of what it takes to be a programmer, and how what to look for from a syntax standpoint. But that language isn't used. And so, yeah, you had the language at one point, but if it's not useful in the new environment, it's not of any use.
Exactly. It looks like let's see, Professor Black Ops, he says, do cloud means less people? And what are your thoughts, Mike? I mean, I kind of I would say no. It's just a lot of jobs will be like, some of the jobs will be transferred to the back end of the cloud area, like Amazon, managing, like becoming a cloud engineer and all that stuff. Some of those jobs will be transitioned from being like a local IT person over to a cloud. If you can get those positions, apply and get those positions. What are your thoughts though, Mike?
Yeah, I think that people who had different skills that are going obsolete or not and is in high demand, I think they get transitioned into different areas, right? Mm-hmm. Depending on where you are. If you're a desktop person, you might get transitioned into cybersecurity because you are accustomed to dealing with the endpoint as well as dealing with the customer, right, the client, because you have a better understanding of what's going on the user side than anything else. I also think for sysadmin guys or sysadmin people, I think those people get transitioned from sysadmin to an SRE, a site reliability engineer, in terms of DevOps, right? Network engineers the same way they get transitioned into SREs. I think with management, that might be a little bit of a different story. Managers may get transitioned into like a CTO role or a more integrated role in terms of like IT ops. And so in terms of cloud compute, they may get rolled into like a custodian of cloud computing services or something like that, right? Because that becomes important. Somebody has to oversee the services, and someone has to handle the back end work as well. And so things are changing. In my environment, they push down VMs or virtual machines down to everyone, and everyone worked from home during COVID. So you don't need a whole lot of desktop support people anymore. So those desktop support people now get transitioned into cybersecurity. Those SysOps people now handle more of the DevOps work. Those network operations people handle more of the VPN responsibilities and AWS structured work. And your IT managers, they either get phased out or they get transitioned into director of cloud compute services or something like that. Somebody has to handle Citrix, somebody has to handle AWS, the cost center. You're running up hundreds of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in utility services in terms of AWS and Oracle and DigitalOcean and things like that. Things like that have to be managed. And so there's a lot of transitioning that's going to happen, and some people will be phased out.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this though. Do you think are you seeing a lot of positions? Because I've been seeing some positions as well. I've been getting hit up in emails for a lot of remote roles, and that kind of ties in the cloud and what you were saying about virtual desktops and all that stuff. Do you see a lot of people getting positions or remote positions since COVID has happened in IT?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's been like a 20 to 25% uptick in remote roles since COVID. Mostly because they just did not have the human resources before, right? They didn't have the human capital before. Because if you can only hire locally, then you were kind of restricted to that local demographic. Now with COVID, you can now say, okay, remote work for the next 9 months because everybody's going to be working from home until 2021. So now you have the advantage to contract yourself out and be a part of that remote workforce. And that's where you're seeing the uptick, right? The sort of, I need that 6 month, 9 month, 12-month contractor to come in and help facilitate some of these operations that we have going.
Okay, cool. Let me ask you this though. I seen another question. Let's see. Oh, engineering cannabis says, how do people prepare for future roles in tech such as blockchain and AI? I appreciate the question, engineering cannabis. Do you have any thoughts on that? Or
how do people prepare for it? Well, it depends on where the people are coming from. So if you don't have a background in tech, it's going to be hard to really jump into blockchain and AI. Those are kind of high level sort of skill set areas and responsibilities. Blockchain is really still changing right now. I think we're only like in the maybe third iteration of blockchain this year. And then you start talking about AI. AI is really, a very niche factor sort of role that is hard to fulfill. And so it's a little early to really speculate on how to get into AI, but AI is a computer science role. So if you go to school for computer science and you really focus on machine learning, data science, and things of that nature, that's going to be the gateway into AI. Most companies are looking for seasoned people or experienced people in terms of AI. When it comes to blockchain, it's a show and prove sort of perspective. It's very meritocracy based. And so for blockchain, you got to have some form of tech background to have a better understanding of how some of these structures work, because it's blockchain is the brand name, but DLT is really the actual name, which is distributed ledger technology. So having a good understanding of databases and cryptography is going to be your saving grace. So I would start in those areas of database operations, as well as cryptography and cloud compute.
Cool. Let me see. And I was looking for any other questions. Let me see. Hold on. Marcus Bolden. Let's see. Kind of an off-class question. If I deploy units to my staff globally, what would be the best method to secure those units so that they can be secure, monitored by myself and team locally? Well, one thing I could tell you, VPN is a great thing, because I worked for a company. It was a global business where they had people in different areas like that manufactured certain goods, and so people in the IT and different departments all use VPNs by connecting to the network, via that to secure everything. Now, as far as monitoring, I know they have a lot of applications out, but Mike V could probably speak to that more. I've used a few or I've seen some that have been used to monitor systems on the network. But do you have any thoughts, Mike? Or
Yeah, that's not really. It depends on what the user count is going to be. And so if you're talking in excess of 200, over 100 plus 100, 250 users, then you start really outsourcing a lot of that stuff because it becomes too large of a task. It's because it needs to scale, right? And unless you have a full-fledged security program in place, that's not really something that you really take on for yourself. And so if you think about it from a logical standpoint, okay, you're pushing virtual machines down, but how are they connecting back remotely, right? They have to connect back through a VPN, whether it's ping or some other form of VPN service that you've adopted in your organization because you had to have adopted some form of VPN, right? Whether you're finance, healthcare, whatever organization it is, you had to have a way to move data in transit in a secure fashion, and VPN was going to be that method, right? The other half is two-factor, multi-factor authentication. Well, you're moving those services behind, the firewall, right? So now, those are the two areas that's going to be of main concern. If it's behind certain perimeters, and you're connecting in a secure fashion, and everybody has a token, those are the mainly two areas that matter. The encryption on the other side of the data is really important too, because data that gets generated has to be secured, right? So it has to be encrypted. And then data that gets that goes from one point to another has to be encrypted as well. So data in transit, data at rest, data being generated also has to be monitored. So you're talking about DLP, data loss prevention. It's just a matter of having a proper security program in place. If you look up the NIST 800 maybe -34, 800-53, 800-61, 800-43, 800-51 as well. The NIST has all of the recommendations and guidelines that you should follow for for security remotely and on-prem.
okay, cool. Let me I see another question. And I don't know if you have time to keep going, but you good?
I'm good, fam.
Okay, cool. Well, Professor Black Ops asks, how is cybersecurity and I would put different in the cloud versus on-prem, as far as I guess managing or handling cybersecurity for the network or whatever. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are basically the difference between on-prem and cloud is that who's responsible for these services, right? You're responsible when it comes to on-prem. You were kind of responsible for the hardware and the uptime. When it comes to cloud, you're responsible for everywhere your data touches, and not so much about the infrastructure. The infrastructure as a service is handled by the infrastructure provider, which would be AWS. In terms of everything else, anything beyond the infrastructure side, when you get up to software as a service, platform as a service, the responsibility now starts to fall on you from a security perspective. From a service provider perspective, the platform, let's say Office 365 or something like that, that's a software as a service, and that's kind of the responsibility of Microsoft to really provide the continuity behind that. But if you did not add two-factor authentication and multi-factor authentication and other sort of security permissions and configurations in place, then you're responsible for that, right? From a platform perspective, it's up to the platform provider to really keep the uptime on that, but it's also your responsibility to keep everything secure from a ingress egress standpoint. And so where the responsibility lies and where you know, who's responsible for what, you know, that is it's a two-factor question. This happened not too long ago to Capital One, right? Capital One had a breach in their cloud compute services, but although the bad guy, the bad person was caught, the threat actor was caught doing it, they're punishable. But it was also the responsibility of Capital One to ensure that that web application firewall in that platform was actually secure, and they did not secure it. Okay, it was a known vulnerability, and they should have taken precaution ahead of time, but they just didn't do it. Maybe they didn't have the resources, maybe they didn't have the bandwidth. It's a variety of things to consider, but at the end of the day, they're still ultimately responsible. And if you're in charge of that stuff, you're just as responsible as well. And from what I've heard and read recently, they're starting to punish people in IT for bad practices. So I will keep that in mind as well.
Oh man, they starting to go after people.
Yeah, if you have misconfigurations and on databases and stuff like that, you're going to get punished now. They basically have what they call a wall of shame. And I've seen this when I used to work at a major organization a couple of years ago. Someone left their desktop open, and it had some really critical information on there, sensitive information on there. And, you know, some other team members actually got a photo of it and then posted it on the wall for everybody walking by the operations center to see that this person left their desktop open with sensitive information on it, and you get the wall of shame. And it stays up there. It stays up there permanently. They don't take it down.
Yeah, and things like that. You know, we all know the IT community is somewhat small, and that stuff like that'll follow you if you you know, mess up something. So
yeah, definitely. You don't want that on your record, and not so much that it's a criminal offense, but it's more of a look at, you know, this guy had his zipper down in the middle of a conference room, you know, in front of everybody. So
I got you. Let me see what else. If anybody else is asking. Oh, and Steve, yeah, definitely. I wanted to do like a quick live stream on Alternative 2. I'll do that later. But just showing people that website, you can see like if you look up let's say Adobe Photoshop or something, then you can search Adobe Photoshop on Alternative 2, and it'll show you other applications that do the same things as Photoshop, and that are either free or for different, you know, OSs like Mac OS or whatever. It covers them all. But let me see if somebody else has. Anybody have any other questions?
There's actually some conversations going on in the chat. I think that is actually pretty relevant. It's, let me just pull up one of them. It says from Alpha Banks, it says, in my opinion, the cloud is harder to secure. You have tons of public endpoints. If you don't do your research, you will not even know they are open. Yeah, that's why you need a what do you call cloud DevOps, not a cloud DevOps team, but a cloud ops team. And so ops is responsible for all of that type of stuff, right? And so you have a risk assessment that you bring security in for SecOps. You bring them into all of that, and that's how all of that gets triaged and handled. It's not really that complicated, but you have to know and ask the right questions to get the right answers so that you don't run into those sort of issues. Cloud ops, you might have half a dozen people, and they may work, you know, 2 or 3 shifts because they have to keep the uptime up. You know, they have to make sure that, because once everybody goes home, yeah, the cloud is up, but you know what's going on at night. You know, the world is not one single time zone; it's multiple time zones. China might be, you know, more active when when you're offline.
Yeah.
Same thing in Russia. Same thing in different areas in the Philippines and whatnot. Southeast Asia is awake while you're asleep. who's monitoring all this type of stuff, who's managing it, who's responding to it overnight. And so you got to start and this goes back to automation. You got to start automating some of these tasks. If we're seeing brute force attempts at 3 o'clock in the morning, let's push those alerts, those critical alerts, to our phones so that we're abreast. In the middle of the night, instead of different ringtones and stuff like that. Some people may have to take different shifts. I might take Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. KeepItTechie might take next week, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. We kind of just rotate around. That's kind of, how it works in operations.
Yeah, well, let me ask you this: like, what is a day-to-day working in cybersecurity? If you want to expand on that or elaborate on that, like, what are some of the things? I mean, that's if you want to, put it out there or whatever. I just wanted to know what's the day-to-day thing you do,
For me, well, to answer your question, for me, I think I work in SecOps, so I'm in a little bit of a different perspective than some other people may be. But for me, I spend a good portion of my time in meetings and conferences, because I have to kind of collaborate with different groups and kind of go over different topologies and so on and so forth to make sure that they're secure and make sure that I'm kept abreast on what's going on, and I'm writing up documentation and different strategies and playbooks, and also doing threat research, what's trending and what's not, and opening up change requests and stuff like that. That's kind of like my day-to-day. Like, I'm not physically fighting bad guys or threat actors, as we call them, with AR-15s and stuff, man. I'm not doing all that type of stuff. I'm really more in the face-to-face with the customer or the client within the organization, because just because you all work in the same organization, you have to treat the department as clients, right? You have marketing. Marketing is really big. You have oncology. You have different sort of departments that need to be interfaced with for different sort of tasks, and so that becomes a part of your day-to-day responsibility. Now, for other people, they may sit inside of a what we call a fishbowl in security, and they may just be going through incident after incident after incident, and closing incidents and opening up, tickets and stuff like that, and trying to resolve things. I don't work in that sort of area like that. I work in a completely different environment, but it's all the same at the end of the day, that we're kind of looking out for the best interests of the company from a security standpoint.
Cool, man. Yeah, I've always been, interested in cybersecurity, just understanding how a lot of these things happen, as far as like companies getting hacked and all that stuff, just so I can understand how to protect myself or protect other people, just understanding how a lot of these criminals operate, what I'm saying, when it comes to just going after people or going after companies and all that stuff. So it's been a big interest of mine, for a while, especially since when I got into Linux. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just agreeing with you. It does get fascinating until you get there, right? Not always cracked up to what it's supposed to be, but yeah. So that's threat intelligence, and depending on the size of your organization, the bigger the organization is, from my understanding, anything more than 250 end users, then you start looking at branching out a threat intelligence analyst, and then you have different sort of incident response analysts, and so on and so forth. A vulnerability, risk and vulnerability, although they fall under compliance and risk, they do become liaisons to the SecOps environment that you're working in. And so, it's starting to expand out, and then some areas are starting to become more constricted, because because cybersecurity has become a lot more automated too. And so you may not need to be 100% focused on looking at the dashboard every single day. You can go off and go do other tasks. And so you might spend less time. You might spend 28 hours to 30 hours working, right, as opposed to 40, because the tasks have been automated in some of these areas. Threat intelligence is something that's really popular now because the bigger the company, the bigger the target. And so you want to make sure that you're kind of threat hunting and going after, reliable leads as to what could potentially impact your organization. If you're a healthcare organization, you're worried about protecting patient healthcare records, or EMRs for that matter, electronic medical records. If you're a school or a big institution, a big academic institution, you may be worried about uptime and being exploited, your students being exploited for that matter. DOS attacks and things like that. Different institutions and different departments have different ways to respond to different threats. So
cool. But I'm gonna go it on and shut it down. Let me see. Hold on. I lost my internet connection. Is he speaking to my question? Let's see. Input security. What are some of the things that could go wrong? Yeah, let me ask you this question. How big of a problem is endpoint security in large shops? What are some of the things that could go wrong? And that's from Steve.
Yeah, it depends on what kind of endpoint you're talking about. If you're talking about like IoT, that's a big problem because IoT is hard to secure at this point because devices get pushed out, but then how do you monitor them, right? So you need a whole framework just for that and that alone. When you start talking about desktops, you've got to worry about the corporate asset versus the BYOD, the bring your own desktop, right? Or bring your own device.
Yeah.
You might have some Android devices. What we find a lot more times is that people don't upgrade their Android phones, and a lot of them have security vulnerabilities. I don't want those devices on my network. So what we do is we create a guest network and let those devices connect to that network and not to the corporate assets. But your corporate assets become a lot more narrow in the scope of responsibility because what all the desktops are built the same. All of at least they should be. The image is pretty much up to speed. You have a dashboard in Microsoft Azure that tells you which desktops have which updates, which vulnerabilities are a priority, and what can be pushed, how long is it going to take to push, when can you push it, you can schedule it out. It's really, really tight now. So in my opinion, to answer his question, the big problem for us is really the loss of an asset. What we had before, this is what MacBooks, and keep in mind that MacBooks don't work with Active Directory, so we can't monitor them.
Yeah.
And what happened with the MacBooks is that, there's a lot of, people who use their MacBooks for personal use and for business use. And we have what we call an AUP, an acceptable use policy, that everyone signs before they receive their device. Well, if someone's watching, porn or Netflix or something like that on their device, we don't know until we actually recover the device. And then we find all of these sort of nefarious logs on there and activity on there and pictures and videos and stuff like that on their games. That becomes a problem. So visibility is the biggest challenges for us in terms of cybersecurity, because if we can't see the device, we can't secure it. And MacBooks are hard to secure at this point. Now, I think Microsoft might be working on something, but at this point, if you don't have JAMF, JAMF, which is a platform for actually centralizing management of MacBooks and iPads, you're kind of screwed. You don't have any visibility, so you have no idea where the device even is. Now, Cisco Meraki has been really good at managing these BYOD devices, so you kind of get an idea of where they are because they put an agent on the device itself, and then you can kind of monitor the location of the device all the way down to the access point. So if there's an access point on the 6th floor in a 20-story building, you know exactly where that device is and who's connected to it and whatnot. That's really good from a security standpoint because it provides that visibility that we would like to need. But what happens if the device is stolen? We can't wipe it. We can't do anything to it.
Yeah, that's I definitely agree, man. Because like I remember when I did network administration work, a lot of the companies that I work with and manage, they had somebody in the I don't know, like I don't know what department that would be, like the people that design the websites or design flyers and all that stuff. They always had like a Mac or something, and it was always difficult to keep a track of that Mac. I think they had like a way of connecting it to Active Directory, but it wasn't that great. You couldn't really track like what you said earlier. Yeah.
Well, same thing in Linux.
Mm-hmm.
We have a lot, developers who love Linux so much that they get their their Lenovo ThinkPads or whatever device, the Dell Latitudes or whatever it is that they use for Linux, right? They'll use Ubuntu or something like that, but we have no visibility into that.
Mm-hmm.
If this person is lifting code and shifting it to a Dropbox or something like that, we really don't have visibility in this area. Okay, we don't have any visibility in this area at all, and so they're just as vulnerable to insider threat as they are to an attack. And so, how do we really go about managing code developers who work in Linux that don't have agents on them? Because we need an agent in order to find visibility. That's really the key. There's very few agents on the market geared towards Linux. I know Trend Micro makes one, but if the person is so savvy that they work in Linux and they can they can disable the agent and whatnot, what use is it, right? So that becomes an insider threat. Those are things that we have to worry about. People stealing code, putting it on USB drives, putting it on Dropbox or some other cloud storage, and then they leave the company and they take all the good, valuable code, and then they go to some other company and make $1 million or whatever it is and sell it to the Russians or the Chinese or something like that. This is what we worry about every day.
Yeah, definitely. Let me ask this one last question. I don't know if you see it in the chat, but it says, is network segmentation the best way to mitigate those endpoint vulnerabilities? Or do you know what he's talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you automatically have network segmentation if you're going to have non-corporate assets on the network. If we can't manage the device, then we can't be responsible for it, and so therefore it can't fall onto our scope of responsibility on the network, right? We do create a guest network or a BYOD network, and we limit it. We limit the bandwidth on it, so we don't allow 2 gigabytes of downloads and stuff like that. Number 2, we limit the amount of time that it can be spent on. So we might limit it down to maybe 4.5 hours, right? A typical workday is 7 to 8 hours. We don't need to have you on the network, sitting around watching Bollywood movies, for 8 hours a day. Who knows what you're doing, in a little corner or cubicle that you're in. And so network segmentation does matter. So thankfully with software-defined networks, we can add some granularization in that area and start putting policies in place to reduce the amount of activity that goes on with BYOD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's and that falls in line with like where I work. I work on defense contract, and I can't even bring my phone in the building where I work at. So they try to keep all that stuff out the building. You know what I'm saying? So, but no, man, I definitely appreciate it. Well, did you have any other things you want to speak on or whatever?
No, man. I think that this is a really good discussion. I think next time around we can probably talk about certifications and things of that nature and more in depth. And
Okay.
keep labbing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you always welcome to come by, man. I'm a hit you up again for another one so we can, I don't know, talk about like you said, certifications or whatever. But let me get the link to your channel because I want to put it in the chat. So people can go by and check you guys out, man. Like I said in the beginning, I really support you guys. I really like what you guys are doing, over at the Black Brain Trust. I try to come up when I can add something to the conversation and not just be a body holding up space and not knowing what you guys are talking about. I'd rather listen, to other discussions. But I
Well,
mean,
you never came through for that hip hop as a science, man.
oh
You're supposed
man,
to defend.
I'm sorry, man. I definitely missed that one. I apologize for missing that one. I think something happened. I can't remember why I missed it, bro. But if y'all do it again, just let me know, man. I definitely want to come by and have that discussion.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and y'all thumbs up the stream. I appreciate everybody coming through. Like I said, go check out the Black Brain Trust. Like I said, I really appreciate, Mike V for taking the time out to come through and talk tech, you know what I'm saying? And their channel, you know what I'm saying, is they put out a lot. Well, I haven't seen y'all doing any live streams, Mike. Everything, good and everything, or
Yeah, Complex will be taking the lead. So
okay.
yeah, he'll be back. He'll be back once he gets things squared away. Sometime next week.
Okay. Cool. So yeah, I'll come through whenever I see the alerts, man. I appreciate
Definitely.
you again.
Absolutely.
Yep, and appreciate everybody coming through the stream, man. Y'all have a good Saturday and keep it techie.